This video is about marriage, but I want to clarify something right from the beginning. When I say marriage, I'm talking about any long-term commitment between two people, not just marriage specifically. It isn't necessary that you go to a church or to City Hall to make it legal. I'll just be using the terms married or marriage for efficiency. And while I'll be talking about male-female partnerships because that's my experience, I believe everything I'm talking about applies just as well to same-sex unions. The issues of living together successfully are identical regardless of who the two people are. Ultimately, the most important thing is the day-to-day, year after year, who's going to do the dishes, what are we doing on Saturday night reality of your connection, not your gender or your legal status. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the 8 dimensions against which any relationship can be judged. Whether you're deciding to be with someone or not be with someone, these are the areas you probably need to focus on. The question of should I get married is really 2 different questions. The first is, do I think this practice of marriage is a good idea for me or a bad idea? The second question is, do I want to get married to this specific person? So I want to deal with the first one first. I actually believe marriage itself is right for just about everyone. I know that's controversial, but please give me a chance to explain why I think that. I feel like the number one reason to get married is that you get an actual human being for free, more or less. Not like slavery, more like voluntary teamwork. And they get you, of course. That's what makes it almost priceless. We get so used to seeing dysfunctional, unhappy marriages that it's easy to take the institution for granted or even to think it's obsolete. The bar is set really low. There's a lot of contempt and laziness out there in relationships. Maybe that's what you saw up close in your parents' relationship, the one masterclass most of us spend years studying up close. But in reality, marriage is a miracle that humans just happen to be really good at finding ways to screw up. I know we hate to talk like marriage is a business deal, and I acknowledge that it sounds really unromantic. So let me just say that marriage has a lot in common with a business deal. It's a total, I'll give you this if you give me that arrangement, just like business. There are very few people who reach my age who haven't either been married or lived with someone for a long time. Why? Because it's the simplest math in the world. 2 people can always accomplish more than 1 person. If you set aside the biological compulsions, that's why everyone keeps trying it. When people say that they don't like marriage, listen to their reasons. I'm going to choose 2 stereotypical complaints that you hear all the time as examples. Like, you'll often hear women say when explaining their lack of enthusiasm for finding a husband, I have no interest in picking up after a man. The implication is that all men are slobs and that marriage always requires an adult female to take care of a giant male toddler. Likewise, a man might say, I've had enough of being nagged night and day by a woman for whom nothing is ever good enough. In both cases, these people think they're against marriage when what they're really against is marriage to the wrong kind of person. I've met men who are neat freaks and women who are super supportive, who have no interest in telling anyone what to do. So for the sake of this discussion, let's just agree that there's nothing wrong with marriage, while also agreeing that marriage to the wrong person can be absolutely miserable. So if you're open to considering this ultimate, I'll give you this if you give me that business deal called marriage, then it comes down to the 2 people involved. You have to find the right person and you have to be the right person. That's what I'm going to talk about. Okay, first of all, let's talk about finding the right person. Whenever I hear about a couple breaking up, I always ask the same question. Were they 2 people who were wrong for each other? Or were they 2 people who were right for each other who just couldn't make it work? The end of the first kind of relationship is inevitable. The end of the second kind is always a tragedy. People talk about marriage as if you're making a selection from multiple possibilities, that it's all about choice, but that's not really what happens for most people. Generally, choice in marriage partners means a yes or no decision about one specific person. It's not like a police lineup, like, hey, there are 9 people here interested in being with you forever. Which one do you want? It's more like you find yourself on the marriage path with one person, and your decision is either keep going or jump off. That keep going inertia is very powerful, by the way. It's not just you, it's the opinions of your friends and your family and your partner's family and your financial commitments and the hall you rented and the honeymoon you booked. And it could be some other things too, like your fear of being alone or the fact that you've already given up a really great apartment to marry this person. And if you don't go through with it, you're going to be homeless. All of them are creating a powerful wind at your back, pushing you to the altar. A good friend of mine told me she was crying when she walked down the aisle at her wedding. Everyone looked at her thinking, oh, it's so sweet. She's emotionally overwhelmed with the joy of the occasion. But the truth was that she already knew it was a mistake on her wedding day. It then took her 5 years to finally end what was already over before she started. And why? Because she didn't want to admit to her friend that she was right when she told her not to marry this guy. You might think that sounds crazy, but so many weddings happen for reasons that people will never admit. If you can get someone off the I found my soulmate narrative, you'll hear lots of crazy reasons behind why people get married. Another factor at work in finding the right person is the concept of settling. We have an entire culture yelling at us to never settle. You deserve to find the person of your dreams, they'll say, which is honestly the most immature advice I've ever heard. Everyone in a successful marriage has learned to settle. Everyone, usually subconsciously. How do I know? Everyone would like a perfect partner because, well, why wouldn't they? But because no human being is perfect, we have to go through a process of learning to live without something that we would really like to have in a person. Sometimes that's easy, but sometimes it's really, really hard. I think it's actually worthwhile putting together a list of what's important to you. I call them compatibility dimensions. Here are some of the most common ones that people are looking for. One, do you want someone you can be proud of? That's a really big thing for me, I've learned. Two, do you want someone who wants sex as often and in the same ways you do? That applies across the whole spectrum, by the way, from just a little bit to a whole lot. Three, do you want someone who is competent and dependable? Four, someone who is physically fit or good looking or stylish. That's real. Five, someone who is positive and supportive, a cheerleader, your biggest fan, your safe harbor. Six, someone who is adventurous, who likes to get out and do things, or conversely, someone who's non-adventurous, who wants to sit on the couch and watch the same shows you do. How about someone who is ambitious, who is motivated to make a lot of money, who sees their career as a priority? Or maybe you really value someone who has the same politics as you do, who is totally aligned with your morals and ethics. Someone you can look at and say, isn't Trump the greatest? Or isn't Trump the worst? Knowing that you don't have to actually argue the point with them. There are other factors, of course, but that list is a pretty good start. Now, isn't it obvious that we would like all of these things in one person? And isn't it also obvious that it's totally impossible to get all 8 of them in one person? There's definitely going to be some compromising. And let me just add right here that most of us don't actually think through these things consciously when we're attracted to someone. We don't fill out a mental checklist on everyone we see and compare them to the last person we saw. Our subconscious is usually making its own powerful calculations that we just aren't really aware of. Some people think when you kiss, for example, you're actually comparing oral microbiomes for compatibility. I don't think that's actual science, but who knows? We are mysteries to our own selves. Okay, having talked about finding the right person, now we're going to talk about being the right person. Now you have an idea of what you want or who you want, but that's where it ends for most people, unfortunately, especially men, I have to say. But to get the right person, you have to be the right person. You have to think about yourself almost like a product. Why would someone want to buy this? Again, I hate to use the analogy of a business deal, but it is actually helpful. Again, that same list of 8 qualities you might want in someone else are things you can cultivate in yourself to be attractive to the right person when they come along. I guess you could ask yourself the following questions. First, admiration. Is there something about you that someone would be proud of? There are so many kinds of accomplishments out there, from crafts to sports to business to personal qualities like kindness or creativity or humor. It's a great exercise to set aside your humility or impulse to be self-critical and ask yourself honestly, what is there in me for someone else to be proud of? Second one, sexual compatibility. Someone who wants sex as often and in the same way as you do. As I said, that applies across the whole spectrum from a little to a lot. But what you really need to cultivate is some flexibility in that area. Imagine someone saying, hey, I love the missionary position and twice a week would be awesome. And the other person says, are you kidding? That's exactly what I like. High five. But even if you do find that person at the beginning, which you won't, but even if you do, the likelihood that you'll both stay the same over the years or change in exactly the same ways is almost zero. Flexibility is key when thinking about sexual compatibility. The third one is competence. Competence is also a big deal. You should be able to bring some kind of practical skill to the table, whether it's staying on top of the bills or doing the laundry or painting a room. At the most basic level, you're pooling your abilities to make daily living more efficient. I know, super romantic. The next area is attractiveness. In terms of fitness or attractiveness, there are certain things you have no control of. No matter how hard you work, you'll never have the facial features of a Zendaya or a Michael B. Jordan if you don't already have them. I don't have them. But you can always be better dressed or fitter than you are now, for example. Those things cost very little and they do make a big difference. Next is positivity. Being supportive, being positive is harder for some people than it is for others. I get that. But it is achievable by everyone if they care. They're skills that can be cultivated. Remember, no one is looking for more negativity in their life. If by chance you're proud of your sarcastic sense of humor, just make sure it's not a cover for bringing others down. You may have grown up with it without realizing what it really is. Next is adventurousness. In terms of getting out there and doing things, there may not be much you can do, but most of us could push ourselves a little bit harder to embrace life more fully. I know someone who recently went through a breakup with a long-term partner. He always thought they were both compatible homebodies until he started seeing someone new who loves to mix and mingle. And what he discovered was that he was denying his true nature all along with his previous relationship just for the sake of getting along. What he thought was his true nature was just an accommodation to someone else's true nature. Next, there's ambition. Ambition can take many forms, from career and money to social and ethical ideals. In this realm, you want to understand what you value the most and have some flexibility in meshing that with another person's values. And finally is social attitudes. This really comes down to one essential question. Can you get along when someone who you're with believes differently than you do on important matters? Even if you think at the beginning that you are totally aligned on everything, you will eventually find that, as with sex, opinions and convictions can drift over time. Can you handle that? While flexibility is important in all these matters, any one of them can be useful for identifying areas where you don't want to be flexible. No one is supposed to be able to get along with everyone. In a way, this list of compatibility dimensions can be a check on the subconscious factors at work in attraction. Also, let me add that this list is not exhaustive. There are other big deal factors like, does this person get along well with your friends and family? Does this person have an unhealthy relationship with substances? Do they seem to relish conflict with yourself and with others? Does this person seem open to new ideas, or are they completely inflexible? But if you work through all 8 of these factors when you're thinking about an intimate relationship, you'll not only encounter various green and red flags in someone else, but you'll maybe see areas where you yourself can be challenged to be better, either for the sake of someone else or just for your own growth and satisfaction. If you like this video, consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons for more on 60 Someday. Thanks so much for taking the time with me today.